Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in an undisclosed region of multi-dimensional creation. The real awareness as a part of the isness everything, a reality that permeates through all consciousness affecting a dimension and position as it does, so anything that is present simulated wise, as manifested from a consciousness installed idea, is available in the endless nowness of the real awareness, isness reality, and is therefore accessible, and where a simulated form can be inserted, which the real awareness animates through, and whatever assignment is required can be executed. In this case, I would be operating in my usual Kevin human form, and my decided destination lay beyond my present location, which appeared to be a series of very large and traffic-laden motorways, and where featured multiple military-style checkpoints. Necessary would it be, seemingly, to negotiate and traverse my way through these motorways to my target destination and bypass the security that had been established. Symbolically, if vehicles we occupy represent ideas we either have created, revealed to be so as we find ourselves as the car driver, or ideas as created by others we have agreed with, where we may find ourselves as a passenger, as the idea agreement culminates in its reflected manifestation, so the vehicle and the route it must take would represent this process of cause to effect. Not only can we determine the origins of the idea we are embracing by virtue of our position in the car, but based on elements and features of the road can it be realized further as to the idea's nature. In this case, impressions revealed the military here, represented the dark forces, standing opposed to the execution of my objective, the military blockades and checkpoints along motorways that were the process of my idea agreement reaching its effect conclusion, the reaching of my destination and carrying out my assignment. In essence, as the decider of everything we experience, that we can in any way be interfered with or sabotaged as to our course of action is according to our agreements. The controllers, the darker forces, the unaware, are as much ideas as everything else in the simulator must be, including their intent and want to disrupt. And their success in regards to disrupting is reliant upon the ideas of them and this intentionality being installed as idea programs in my consciousness, only made possible by my agreement decision, and which then becomes my experience in relation to them. Evidently, the dark forces had the ability to attempt interference here. They had this extent of agreement, or they could not have featured in my experience. In reality, as we all share the ideas that are the simulator's multi-dimensional layout, we effectively have uploaded to our consciousnesses the same overall game as an analogy, and ultimately then, potentially, every individual's experience is accessible by any other. What limits accessibility is additionally created ideas and effected circumstances that render us beyond the immediate reach of others. But as I said, overall, we are all operating within the same arena, bound within the same simulator stadium. But although then other individuals may feature, they may have developed themselves, their created body forms, with particular abilities or skill sets. They may desire to impose these abilities upon us, but as I mentioned, this can only be so as our agreements in relation to them dictate. The darker forces have made it their business to trawl agreement of a particular on a vast simulator scale that allows them to impose adversely into the experience of practically all that dwell within this creational realm, giving them the ability to harm, torture, and if necessary, eradicate anyone they so choose at any given moment. Although, despite this being the case, the process of awareness involves a releasing of all agreements of consciousness, including those as extended to the darker forces, and although then the simulator controllers may be constant in their interfering efforts, their ability to be successful continuously diminishes as our awareness process and agreement tapline releasing proceeds. Impressions revealed that I sought something of great importance in this real side experience, something exceedingly valuable that would be of galactic significance, though at this stage nothing would be revealed as to the specifics. The darker forces were aware of my quest to seek whatever this may be, and represented here was their preventative effort. The checkpoints were designed specifically for myself, and to block my ability of reaching my goal. A little like how the police and military may seek a particular fugitive, but have established a mechanism of search that affects all road users as they systematically check every vehicle, etc. Interestingly, although driving my own vehicle, the architect of my own effect manifestation accompanying me would be two other individuals, both human and occupying their own respective vehicles, and additionally both would be male and Chinese. My personal self had no recognition of these two men, but they had a particular developed facility where they could, in a curious way that was difficult to describe, manipulate the situation, designed to facilitate my bypassing the established dark force checkpoints. The dark force resistance to my objective was extreme. the sense of almost trying to wade through thick mud. Two of these gifted Chinese characters wasn't enough therefore, and required was a further Chinese man with the same developed abilities. As I mentioned, everything consciousness affected, including body forms, is animated by the same overall source. This isness, real awareness, we all are, and a part of. Where it makes sense to do so, at any moment, the isness, real awareness, can acquisition directly any of what are effectively its body forms in creation, and rather dictate the actions of them, where benefit can be derived from such measures. In such instances, this expresses as the sense of my real awareness taking control of any participant in the experience as decided. In this case, I would assume possession of the third Chinese man entering the scene and utilize his developed, creationally manipulating gifts to a greater degree than he was able, and this coupled with the efforts of the two others ensured my ability to bypass the various dark force checkpoints, the scene skipping to where I then had reached my intended destination. The scene now was of a very visually indeterminable region of creation, as though making limited sense to my personal self, and so much of the environment I was in was as though unable to be registered, and would present as nothing simulation-wise in the experience. Although the impression of an environment, but beyond the personal self available experiential references to make sense of. It seemed to be a particular area of creation where something of a greater potency was kept, a something that was as indiscernible as the overall environment where it was contained. However, as I mentioned, it was a something of immense value that if utilized in a way that made sense with life, great benefit, awareness speaking, could be the result. And this seemed to be my objective, to locate this item, artifact, or power source, and determine as to its possible and beneficial application. Residing in this curious dimensional position were a group of 6 or so dragons, the quadrupedal variety of varying scaled skin colorations. These were body forms where the secondary personal self had been established. They were not in any way dark force affiliated, were very large in size, and had developed themselves that they were imbued with all manner of what may be termed magical ability. These dragons were charged with ensuring the safety of whatever it was that this dimension contained. I would engage with these dragons, more a case of telepathic communication, an exchange of ideas, utilizing their own developed language, an interaction as orchestrated by my real awareness, and where I would be successful in assuring the dragons that I was not here to plunder the valuable item, but to possibly use it beneficially if the dragons were agreeable. They were accepting of my request, but they were alerted also to the potentiality of a dark force impending infringement into their dimensional spot, as though the dark forces were also planning to make their move in an attempt on the acquisition of the item of value. My presence then was somewhat timely, for the dragons would recognize the abilities that I could afford via my real awareness, and they were uncertain as to if they could repel alone what would be a very serious dark force effort for the item, as powerful as the dragons may have been. As such, we rather struck a bargain, that I would agree to remain with them for a duration, as seemingly the dark forces only had a certain window by which they could attempt to steal the item, as though, for whatever consciousness decided and simulation exacted reason, this was the agreed-to situation in regards to the dimension which housed the valuable item and the accessing of it. The design of multi-dimensional creation is according to the overall consciousness program that affects it, that although all who enter the simulator take on the program as it currently stands, each participant, as now part of the consciousness engine room, through their contributions, creations, and agreements, can effect change then to the simulator's layout. The ultimate example of this being that as each participatory consciousness becomes overladen with ideas of restriction, and indeed unconsciousness prevails and becomes increasingly so, the simulator effects in reflected accord and goes through its cycles of deterioration. And as things currently stand, there are all manner of curious dimensions and regions of the simulator that through the additionally created ideas as formulated and agreed with by the simulator participants, so certain positions have been established with particular rule sets, so to speak, laws of physics, so to say, and varying degrees by which ease of access to them is so. In this case, as I said, a dimensional region where access is extremely limited except through exceptional know-how, and only then small and infrequent windows of opportunity are present where it can be reached, as though, for the vast majority of so-called time, the dimension is rendered inaccessible to all in the simulator, besides the dragons that maintain their constant guard and vigil of the valuable item residing there. And so it was, I was agreeable to assume a post with the dragons, that the abilities as made available via my real awareness would be a viable repelling mechanism of anything a dark force ill-intended that attempted to make use of the window and acquire the item of value. In exchange for my services, and where the window of dimensional accessing are closed, I would be permitted to make use of the item, as though it were some type of power, energy, or frequency, though taking a form by which it could be transported, and where I would return it to the dragon's keeping when I had used it for what I intended it for. Very possibly I would agree to assume my post in assistance of the dragons and protection of the item during subsequent periods where this window, this opening into their dimension was present, but for now, as I established my first shift of item protection, I would decide to transform myself into a similar body type as those guarding the item. I became also a large quadrupedal dragon. It was as though the dark forces were aware of my presence as impressions revealed, and were reluctant to make an attempt on the item while I was present, perhaps realizing that although they may have secured it despite the powerful dragons, the abilities I could bring to bear through my real awareness would be more than they could deal with, and their pilfering plans would be met with failure. However, they did deploy a particular agent, an individual that through an awareness process once embraced has retained a certain skill set and a level of ability that has made them a valuable dark force asset. Now the individual has effectively been turned and is working on behalf of them. The individual was none other than Kelsey, and on her withdrawal from the new presentation, and her decided forfeiting of her awareness process, she would additionally decide to cause as much derision and disruption as possible. And on the real side, I would be shown numerable examples which revealed how she now was working with the dark forces as they make use of her developed skills, as I have previously shared. For generally, individuals who relinquish intent with the recognition of the All-Is will retain a greater array of abilities than those never having begun such a journey. Abilities as developed along an awareness process now abandoned, and if they can be turned by the dark forces, they can become valuable assets and agents. Kelsey is operating in such a capacity, and constantly so, and her particular skill revolves around her ability to seduce, allure, and bend others to her will consequently. And in this experience, she would be activated by the dark forces. She would access the dimension of the dragons, making use of the window available, and seem to worm her way into the dragon's confidence. Her objective was to cause disruption, and she would do this by a form of seduction not unlike the influence, and attempt to turn the dragons on each other. She would occasionally take form, presenting as her human Kelsey body type, but on such occasions she would only be visible to me, a visual verification of impressions, assuring me of Kelsey's presence and operation. From the dragon's perspective, she was more a formless essence, though able to engage with them and undermine the equilibrium established between them. This would result in a constant altercation between the dragons, that although they were very gifted and creationally powerful, they were not beings with intent set with the ears. They had no recognition or realization of the true real awareness essence of themselves, very much personal self-operating body forms, and so they would be driven by their own particular created attitudes and personalities, established routines, and ingrained reactions to certain created stimuli, etc. Kelsey seemed effective in determining exactly what buttons to press, and set the dragons at each other's throats. That should she cause enough confusion and distraction, that very likely other Dark Force minions would pilfer the item of value from under the squabbling dragons' noses. I was rather instrumental then in also maintaining a constant engaging telepathically with the dragons, resolving and diffusing every volatile situation as made manifest through Kelsey's influence. This was rather a stalemate situation. It went back and forth for a duration, but as long as I was present and constant in nullifying Kelsey's efforts, the dark forces wouldn't make a move to acquire the item, as was the intention and purpose for Kelsey's deployment. That although the window of dimension accessing remained open for whatever period of duration that it did, I maintained my post, and my repelling of Kelsey's effort for what was one night on the real side from my personal self's perspective. And at a certain moment Kelsey faded from the scene. She had failed in her objective, suggesting the window had closed, and the dimension and the item of value it contained would be safe for now, rendered inaccessible. I would remain in my dragon form for yet a while, as though further ensuring that all Kelsey instigated derision had been resolved, and there the experience would end. As I said, it seems I am agreeable to assume a guardian post of the dimension with the dragons every time it becomes accessible, and the valuable item, whatever it may have been, is therefore vulnerable. Very likely I will be making use of this item beneficially at some stage, and it remains to be seen if I am shown further developments in regards to this and the item's application.